The job posting had been suspiciously vague. Interspecies communication specialist needed for remote assignment. Pediatric experience preferred. Hazard pay included. Mira should have known better. Hazard pay was never a good sign. She stood in Station Administrator Glorp's office, staring at the gelatinous being who was technically her new boss. Glorp looked like someone had given a jellyfish a bureaucratic degree and a drinking problem. His translucent body pulsed with colors that Mira's translator helpfully informed her meant deeply uncomfortable. "Let me get this straight," Mira said, scanning the datapad he'd shoved at her. "You need me to provide psychological support to juvenile detainees?" "Subjects," Glorp corrected, his voice burbling through the translator. "Dangerous subjects. Apex predator species all under 5 solar cycles. Orphaned, traumatized, extremely violent." Mira looked up from the pad. "So it's a daycare." The color that flashed through Glorp's body didn't need translation. Pure horror. "These are apex predators," he sputtered, wobbling so hard he nearly fell off his support platform. "Fenrir, Ursidae primaris, Kresh, species that could tear a full-grown human apart. We keep them separated in individual containment units because together they would kill each other, yeah, I got that part." Mira scrolled through the files, frowning. "But nobody's actually working with them? You're just storing them?" "We feed them. We ensure survival. What more is required?" "I don't know, maybe enrichment, socialization, literally any kind of emotional support?" Mira pinched the bridge of her nose. "These are kids, right? Traumatized kids who've lost their families?" "They are weapons that haven't grown into their full potential yet," Glorp said flatly. "We maintain them until their respective governments decide what to do with them." "Maintain them, like equipment." "Precisely." Mira should have walked out right then. But she'd already signed the contract, and student loans didn't pay themselves. Besides, she'd worked with difficult cases before. How different could alien kids really be? "Fine," she said. "When do I start?" Glorp's color shifted to something that might have been relief. "Immediately. Follow me to the containment wing. And for the love of the council, please read the non-contact protocols." "The what now?" "You are not, under any circumstances, to physically engage with the subjects. No touching. No direct interaction. You observe through the barriers, you take notes, you provide reports. That's all." Mira stopped walking. "You want me to counsel kids without talking to them? They're not kids, they're—" Yeah, apex predators, I heard you the first 8 times. She waved him off. "Look, I've worked with kids hopped up on birthday cake and pure chaos energy. How different can this be?" The color that pulsed through Glorp suggested he had opinions about that statement. He wasn't wrong. The containment wing smelled like fear and disinfectant. Mira walked down the corridor, her tablet clutched in one hand, trying not to react to what she was seeing. 12 individual cells. 12 small figures inside. 12 different kinds of nightmare. Except they weren't nightmares. They were just scared. The first cell contained what looked like a bear cub crossed with a tank. The Ursidae primaris, bolder according to the file, was massive even as a juvenile, covered in thick gray fur and muscle. She was rocking back and forth in the corner, methodically slamming her head against the wall. Slow. Steady. Self-soothing through pain. Mira's stomach twisted. Next cell. A Kresh cub, feline and golden, pacing in tight circles. The file said her name was Streak. She'd worn a path in the floor. Around and around and around, tail lashing, never stopping. Third cell. A small wolf-like creature curled in a ball. So still, Mira thought he might be dead, until she saw the rapid breathing. The file labeled him Runt, Fenrir species, the smallest of the group. Every single cub showed signs of severe trauma, stereotypic behaviors, self-harm, hypervigilance, learned helplessness, and the aliens were treating them like they were in timeout. Mira opened her tablet and started a new file. She titled it, "Why is nobody treating these like traumatized children?" Because that's what they were. Strip away the fur and fangs and claws, and these were kids who'd lost everything. Kids who were terrified and alone and desperate for any kind of comfort. Kids in cages. The protocols are very clear, Glorp said, hovering behind her. Observation only. The barriers remain active at all times. If you need to communicate, use the intercom. Right. Super therapeutic. I'm sure that'll really help build trust. Trust is not the objective. Then what is? Glorp's color went flat. Keeping them alive until they're someone else's problem. Mira looked at him, then back at the cubs, then at her tablet. She was absolutely going to violate every single one of these protocols. But first, she needed to assess the situation. She moved from cell to cell, making notes. Each cub was showing different trauma responses, but the pattern was clear. Sensory deprivation, social isolation, lack of enrichment. Basic needs met, but nothing else. No wonder they were falling apart. She was on her second pass through when the screaming started. Runt had been quiet when she'd first seen him. Too quiet. The kind of shutdown that came from complete overwhelm. Now he was anything but quiet. The small Fenrir cub was throwing himself against the walls of his cell with desperate, violent intensity. The sound was horrible, a high-pitched keening that made Mira's teeth hurt. He wasn't trying to escape. He was just breaking down. Complete sensory meltdown. Fight-or-flight response with nowhere to go. Alarms blared. Guards appeared from nowhere, weapons drawn. "Prepare tranquilizer!" Glorp shouted. "Wait!" Mira started. "Step back, human! He's dangerous!" Runt slammed into the barrier again. Blood streaked the transparent surface. His screaming got worse. The guards raised their weapons, and Mira made a decision that would change everything. She walked straight to the cell controls and hit the release. "What are you doing?" Glorp's entire body flashed red. "My job," Mira said calmly. The barrier dropped. Runt spun toward her, eyes wild, hackles raised, lips pulled back from way too many teeth. 3 guards aimed at him. Mira just walked in. "Hey, buddy," she said softly. "It's okay. You're okay." The cub lunged, and Mira did exactly what she'd done 1,000 times before with 1,000 different scared kids. She dropped to her knees and caught him. Runt collided with her chest, snarling, snapping, all claws and panic. Mira just wrapped her arms around him and held on tight. Firm pressure. Safe containment. The kind of hold that said, "I've got you, you're safe, I'm not letting go." "You're okay," she murmured. "I've got you. You're safe now." Runt screamed again, but it was different this time. Not rage, not fear. Grief. The cub went completely limp in her arms and just sobbed. The sound was heartbreaking. Small and broken and so painfully young. Mira held him tighter. The screaming stopped. The alarms went quiet. And every single cub in every single cell stopped what they were doing and stared. Glorp made a sound like a dying wail. You just gave a scared kid a hug. Yeah." Mira adjusted her grip on Runt, who was now clinging to her like she was the only solid thing in the universe. "Revolutionary, I know. That's a predator. That's a traumatized child. He could have killed you. But he didn't." Mira looked down at the small wolf cub shaking in her arms. "Because he didn't want to hurt anyone. He just wanted someone to make it stop hurting." She looked up at the other cells. 11 pairs of eyes stared back at her. And in every single one, she saw the same thing. Desperate, aching hope. Somewhere in the station, security footage was recording everything. Somewhere in the galaxy, someone was about to make this everyone's problem. But in that moment, Mira just sat on the floor of an alien containment cell, holding a crying wolf cub, while 11 apex predators watched with expressions the aliens couldn't identify. Recognition. Because every single one of them knew exactly what Runt had just found. Someone who actually cared. And that changed everything. By day 3, Glorp had filed 89 incident reports. Mira knew this because he kept shoving them in her face while his gelatinous body flashed increasingly alarming colors. "Unauthorized physical contact. 47 instances," he burbled, wobbling with agitation. Breach of containment protocols. 12 counts. Introduction of unauthorized materials. You mean the blankets? Mira didn't look up from where she was arranging cushions in what used to be the sterile, containment common area. Yeah, super dangerous. Someone might get comfortable. The protocols exist for a reason. The protocols exist because nobody here knows the first thing about trauma-informed care. She stepped back to survey her work. The room now had 3 distinct quiet corners with soft lighting, a pile of weighted blankets she'd requisitioned from the station's medical supplies, and several textured surfaces for sensory regulation. There. Much better. Glorp made a sound like a clogged drain. You've turned a secure containment facility into a safe space? A liability. Potato. Mira checked her tablet. Now, are you going to help me transition the cubs to group time? Or are you going to file another report about it? Both. Fair enough. The transition was easier than she'd expected. After the incident with Runt, the other cubs had been watching her with intense interest. When she'd opened their cells that morning and invited them out, there'd been hesitation, but also hope. Now, 4 hours later, she had 12 apex predators sprawled around the common area in various states of relaxation. Boulder, the massive Ursidae cub, had claimed the biggest weighted blanket and was making a sound that was either purring or a small earthquake. Streak, the creche, was finally still for the first time since Mira had arrived, curled up in a patch of warm sunlight from the observation window. And Runt hadn't left Mira's side once. This is unprecedented, Glorp muttered, his color shifting to something that might have been grudging fascination. They're not fighting. They're not even establishing dominance hierarchies. That's because they're not in survival mode anymore. Mira gently scratched behind Runt's ears. He made a happy wuffling sound and pressed closer. When you stop treating kids like threats, they stop acting like threats. Funny how that works. They're not kids, they're... If you say apex predators one more time, I'm going to make you sit in the timeout corner. Glorp's translator made a choking sound. That's when the scientists arrived. Mira had been expecting bureaucrats. Maybe some kind of inspector. She hadn't been expecting a full xenopsychology research team. There were 6 of them, led by a crystalline being who introduced himself as Dr. Prax. His body refracted light in dizzying patterns, and he carried enough recording equipment to film a documentary. Fascinating, Prax breathed, his voice chiming like wind through glass. Absolutely fascinating. The human has established pack dominance through submission displays. Mira looked up from where she was helping a small reptilian cub named Scales work through some anxiety breathing. I'm sorry, what? The positioning. Prax gestured at her sitting on the floor. You deliberately place yourself below the larger specimens, triggering their protective instincts while simultaneously demonstrating non-threatening behavior. It's brilliant. I'm sitting on the floor because there aren't enough chairs. And the physical contact. Another scientist, something that looked like a floating collection of geometric shapes, bobbed excitedly. Clearly a mating behavior repurposed for interspecies control. Mira stared. I'm literally just giving them hugs, you weirdos. Hugs, Prax repeated, recording the word carefully. A tactical compression hold designed to restrict movement while providing sensory input. Ingenious. It's not... Mira pinched the bridge of her nose. You know what? Never mind. Do your research or whatever, just don't disturb the cubs. But the scientists were already fanning out, scanners whirring, taking measurements of absolutely everything. One of them approached Boulder, who was still contentedly buried under her weighted blanket. The scientist extended some kind of probe toward her. Boulder's eyes snapped open. She growled. The scientist jumped back. Hey, Mira called out. Personal space. She's not a specimen. She's a kid having quiet time. But the data can wait until she's ready to interact. Mira stood up, carefully moving Runt to a nearby cushion. Look, I get that this is interesting to you, but these cubs have been poked and prodded enough. If you want to observe, observe. But no invasive procedures, no sudden movements, and absolutely no touching without consent. Prax's crystalline structure flickered. They're juveniles. They can't provide consent. They can absolutely communicate discomfort, which is what Boulder just did. Mira crossed her arms. Now, are we going to respect that, or do I need to file an ethics complaint? The scientists huddled together, chittering in various frequencies. Finally, Prax turned back. We will observe from a respectful distance. Great. There's a corner over there. Try not to be creepy about it. She turned back to check on the cubs, and found Streak having a small meltdown in one of the quiet corners. The creche cub was hissing and swatting at nothing, ears flat, tail lashing, overstimulated. Too many new people, too much change, too much too fast. Mira approached slowly, keeping her body language relaxed. Hey Streak, you doing okay? The cub hissed louder. I know. Too much going on, right? Want some help regulating? Streak lunged at her. Mira had maybe half a second to react. She did what her training had taught her. She stepped into the movement instead of away, caught Streak mid-leap, and wrapped her arms around the struggling cub in a firm hold. I've got you, she said calmly, even as claws scraped against her jacket. You're safe. We're just going to sit here until you feel better. Streak thrashed, yowled, fought. Mira just held on, adjusting her grip to keep both of them safe, murmuring reassurances. Behind her, she could hear the scientists losing their minds. Subject employs restraint comfort paradox. Note the contradictory signals. Physical restriction paired with vocal, soothing. The juvenile appears to be regulating despite continued resistance. Mira ignored them. She focused on Streak, on matching her breathing to the cubs, on providing the deep pressure that would help bring her back down from the panic spiral. 30 seconds. 1 minute. 2. Slowly, Streak's struggles weakened. The yowling turned to whimpering, the whimpering to small, hitching breaths. Then, finally, she went limp in Mira's arms. There we go, Mira said softly. That's better, isn't it? Streak made a tiny mewing sound and pressed her face against Mira's shoulder. Yeah, I know. It's been a lot, but you're doing great. She held the cub for another few minutes, until Streak's breathing evened out completely. Then, carefully, she loosened her grip. Streak didn't run. She just curled up against Mira's side, purring softly. The scientists were vibrating with excitement. Revolutionary, Prax chimed. She's weaponized empathy. Mira was really starting to hate these people. The footage reached the Galactic Council within 6 hours. Mira didn't know about it until Glorp burst into the common area, flashing colors she'd never seen before. They're sending an investigation team, he burbled frantically. Military. The council saw the reports. What reports? All of them. His entire body quivered. The videos, the scientific observations, the incident logs. They're calling it a critical containment breach and demanding immediate assessment. Mira looked down at the cubs. Most of them were in what she'd started calling the cuddle puddle. A pile of sleepy predators who decided that napping together was better than napping alone. Runt was draped across her lap. Boulder's massive head rested on her foot. Streak was purr-snoring against her leg. Let me guess, Mira said dryly. They think I'm mind-controlling them or something equally ridiculous. They think you're an apex predator. Mira blinked. I'm sorry, what? Glorp pulled up a holographic display. It showed footage from that morning. Runt bringing her something small and furry and very dead, his tail wagging hopefully. Mira accepting it with a smile, thanking him, and gently redirecting him toward appropriate toys. They're calling it tribute, Glorp said weakly. Predator offering tribute to a superior predator. He brought me a dead rat because he's a dog-wolf thing, and that's what they do when they like you. The council has voted to send a military assessment team. Glorp's color went pale. Because, and I quote, no prey species should be able to pacify multiple apex juveniles without weapons or chemical assistance. Mira stared at the hologram, at the council's formal statement, at the words potential threat assessment and unknown pacification method. Then she started laughing. This isn't funny. It's hilarious. Mira wiped her eyes. They're sending the military because I gave some traumatized kids hugs and basic emotional support. The bar is so low it's in hell. and somehow I'm still impressive for stepping over it. Runt stirred in her lap, making a questioning sound. It's okay, buddy, she murmured, petting him. Just adults being ridiculous. Glorp wobbled anxiously. They'll be here in 2 days. What are you going to tell them? Mira looked at the pile of peacefully sleeping predators, then at the scientists in the corner, still frantically taking notes, then at Glorp's terrified gelatinous face. The truth, she said simply. That these are traumatized children who needed someone to actually care about them. And if the galaxy's military has a problem with that, they can file a complaint. Somewhere in council space, alarms were being raised. Threat assessments were being filed. Military teams were being mobilized. All because one human woman had committed the apparently revolutionary act of treating scared kids with basic kindness. The galaxy wasn't ready for attachment theory, but ready or not, here it came. The military assessment team arrived in full tactical gear. Mira looked up from where she was braiding colorful strings with Streak and 2 other cubs, watched 6 armed soldiers march into her therapeutic space, and said, "You've got to be kidding me." The team leader was an insectoid being who stood nearly 7 feet tall, covered in chitinous armor that gleamed like oil. His compound eyes swept the room with mechanical precision, and the weapon mounted on his thorax swiveled to track every movement. "I am Commander Jek of the Galactic Security Forces," he announced, his voice clicking through a translator. "I am here to assess the threat level of this facility." The threat level, Mira repeated slowly, of a daycare. Of a human who has compromised 12 apex predator juveniles through unknown means. Jek's mandibles clicked sharply. "I require immediate disclosure of your pacification technique." Mira set down the string craft. Several cubs shifted closer to her, sensing the tension. "My pacification technique," she said, voice dripping with sarcasm, "is called attachment theory and a trauma-informed approach." Jek's entire security team raised their weapons slightly. Attachment theory. Jek's translator struggled with the words. What chemicals does this attachment theory contain? Mira stared at him. Are you serious right now? All pacification methods employ either chemical or technological intervention. Disclose the delivery mechanism. Oh my God. Mira rubbed her face. Okay, fine. It contains oxytocin mostly, which their brains make themselves when they feel safe and cared for. Also, probably some dopamine and serotonin. You know, the neurochemicals that regulate emotional well-being? The security team exchanged rapid clicks. Jek's posture shifted to what Mira's pattern recognition screamed was aggressive. You admit to biochemical manipulation. I admit to understanding basic neuroscience, Mira shot back. These cubs were in constant stress. Response. Cortisol and adrenaline through the roof. I gave them an environment where their brains could produce the chemicals they needed to regulate. That's not manipulation, that's just how brains work. She's weaponizing their own biology, one of the soldiers hissed. I'm literally just being nice to them. Runt, who'd been pressed against Mira's leg, started growling. Low, continuous, his hackles rising. The other cubs noticed. Streak's ears went flat. Boulder shifted her massive bulk, placing herself between Mira and the soldiers. One by one, the 12 predators stopped what they'd been doing and focused on the threat in their space. The armed threat pointing weapons at their human. Jek's mandibles spread in what might have been satisfaction. See? She's turned them into weapons. They respond to her emotional state, ready to attack on command. Or, Mira said, exhausted and done with this nonsense, maybe they just don't like you because you're being threatening? We have done nothing. You marched in here with guns drawn, talking about threat assessments and pacification, in a room full of traumatized kids. Mira stood up, and 12 cubs immediately pressed closer. They're not responding to commands, they're responding to danger. Because you're acting dangerous, Boulder growled, a sound that rattled the floor panels. The soldiers' weapons tracked to her. Stand down, Jek ordered. She's protecting me, Mira snapped. Because that's what happens when you build trust and attachment. They know I'm safe. They know you're not. The Ursidi specimen is positioning for attack. She's positioning between you and me, you absolute buffoons. Boulder took another step forward. Her ears were back, her muscles coiled, but she wasn't attacking. She was just blocking, standing between the perceived threat and her human. Jek's weapon charged with an audible whine, and Mira did the worst possible thing. She stepped in front of Boulder. The room went absolutely silent. 12 apex predator juveniles watched a human woman place herself between their largest member and an armed military team. Watched her spread her arms slightly, making herself bigger, putting her soft, unarmored body directly in the line of fire. "Lower your weapons," Mira said quietly. "Now." "You're shielding a predator," Jek said, and for the first time his voice carried something other than military precision, confusion. "You're a prey species. This contradicts all survival instinct." "She's not a predator. She's a scared kid who thinks you're going to hurt me." Mira didn't move. "And I'm not letting that happen." "You would die to protect it?" "Her. And yes." Mira's voice was steady. "That's what you do for kids in your care. You protect them. Even when it's stupid. Even when it's dangerous. That's the job." Behind her, Boulder made a sound, small, confused, almost like a whimper. Then the cub pressed against Mira's back. Not hiding, supporting. And the other. Cubs moved, not to attack, to shield. They formed a circle around Mira, facing outward, creating a living barrier of fur and scales and chitin. Runt pressed against her legs. Streak flanked her left. A reptilian cub named Spike took her right. The others filled the gaps. 12 small predators, standing together, protecting their human. The military team stood frozen, weapons raised, not understanding what they were seeing. "This is..." Jek's translator crackled. "This is not possible. Pack behavior is species-specific. Cross-species protective formations don't exist." "They do now," Mira said. "But you're prey. They should be..." "What? Eating me?" Mira let out a laugh that was slightly unhinged. "You keep saying that word like it means something. Prey. Predator. Like biology is destiny. Like these kids can't choose to care about someone just because they have different teeth than me." "Biology is destiny. Predators don't protect prey species. The entire galactic order is built on this fundamental truth." "Then maybe," Mira said, her voice cutting through the chaos, "your fundamental truth is wrong." Jek's weapon swiveled between targets. Cubs, human, cubs again. Like his tactical programming couldn't compute what to prioritize. "You need to stand down," he said finally. "All of you. This is a military order." "This is a therapeutic space," Mira countered, "and you're disrupting it. So how about you stand down and get out of my facility before I file a formal complaint about you traumatizing children?" "They're not children." Mira was so tired of hearing that. She looked at Jek, at his weapons, at his soldiers, at the absolute certainty in his posture that he was right and she was dangerous. Then she sat down, just dropped right to the floor, cross-legged, in the middle of her circle of protective predators. "What are you doing?" Jek demanded. "Sitting. It's been a long day." Mira patted the floor beside her. "Anyone else tired?" Runt immediately flopped into her lap. Boulder settled beside her with a huff that ruffled Mira's hair. Streak curled up on her other side, purring. One by one, all 12 cubs abandoned their protective formation to pile onto and around their human. Within 30 seconds, Mira was buried under a mountain of apex predators who'd decided that nap time was more important than military standoffs. She looked up at Jek from her position at the bottom of the cuddle pile. "Still think they're weapons?" Jek's mandibles worked silently. His soldiers lowered their weapons slowly, looking at each other with what Mira was pretty sure was complete bewilderment. "I need to report this," Jek said finally. "You do that." Mira scratched behind Runt's ears. "We'll be here," cuddling, menacingly. The security footage went viral within hours. Mira didn't know this until Glorp appeared, flashing colors that her translator had given up trying to interpret, holding a datapad that was pinging so constantly it sounded like an alarm. "The entire galaxy has seen it," he burbled weakly. "Seen what?" "You. shielding Boulder, the cubs forming a protective circle. He made a sound like gargling static. The cuddle pile of doom, as the networks are calling it. The what now? Glorp turned the datapad around. The headline read, Human becomes center of predator pack cuddle pile. Military baffled. Below it, the footage played on loop. Mira stepping in front of Boulder, the cubs surrounding her. All of them settling down for a group nap while armed soldiers watched in confusion. The comment sections were on fire. How is she still alive? Those are apex species. This violates natural law. The human is clearly an alpha predator in disguise. New theory. Humans are predators who pretend to be prey. Mira scrolled through the increasingly unhinged speculation with growing disbelief. They think I'm a predator, she said flatly. The Galactic Council has declared an emergency session. Glorp's color went pale gray. They're calling it unprecedented cross-species pack bond formation. The implications are being labeled as catastrophic. Catastrophic. The entire galactic social order is based on predator-prey dynamics. If those can be overridden through... He gestured helplessly at the cuddle pile. Through whatever this is, then everything we know about interspecies relations is wrong. Or, Mira said, gently moving Streak's paw off her datapad, maybe it was always wrong, and you're just now figuring it out. They're demanding you testify before the full council. Of course they are. They want to know how you did it. How you created this bond. How you turned apex predators into... Glorp's voice dropped to a whisper. Into a family. Mira looked down at the cubs sleeping peacefully around her. Runt snoring softly. Boulder's massive head resting on her knee. Streak's tail curled around her wrist like a living bracelet. I didn't turn them into anything, she said quietly. I just showed them they didn't have to be alone. Somewhere in council chambers, emergency sessions were being called. Xenopsychologists were publishing papers with titles like The Predator-Prey Paradigm, A Comprehensive Failure. Military strategists were trying to understand how a single unarmed human had accomplished what centuries of galactic policy insisted was impossible. And Mira? Mira was sitting on the floor of her therapeutic space, covered in sleeping apex predators, wondering how basic kindness had become a revolutionary act. The galaxy wasn't ready for attachment theory, but the cubs were, and that was going to change everything. The Galactic Council chamber was designed to intimidate. Mira stood in the center, looking up at hundreds of alien dignitaries, thinking this felt like the principal's office. Except the principal was a sentient gas cloud. You stand accused of dangerous emotional manipulation, the head counselor intoned. I gave traumatized kids hugs, Mira said, flatly. Holographic footage played, cubs following her, sleeping near her, bringing dead offerings. You've made yourself their pack leader. I made myself their therapist, Glorp testified next, flashing horrified colors. She violated every protocol. She even sang to them. The chamber gasped. It was Twinkle Twinkle Little Star for bedtime, Mira said. You're acting like I taught them warfare. Dr. Prax presented scientific findings. The human employs strategic vulnerability to establish dominance. He showed footage of Mira sitting on the floor with cubs. Or I sat down because I was tired. The hug is clearly a restraint technique. Another scientist displayed anatomical diagrams. That's literally just how you hug someone. The chamber erupted in argument until an ancient voice rumbled. Enough. Elder Tormund, a turtle mountain being, rose slowly. Do these techniques work on all traumatized juveniles? Yes, Mira said. Trauma-informed care is pretty universal. And you learned this from human children? Yeah. We all need to feel safe and connected. Tormund was silent. How long have we been isolating traumatized cubs? 3,000 cycles, another counselor admitted. 3,000 cycles of keeping frightened children alone in cages. Tormund's voice was heavy. This human accomplished in 3 days what our protocols failed to do in 3 millennia. He looked at Mira. I nominate her as interspecies juvenile wellness consultant. What? Mira yelped. The vote passed. I just wanted to help some scared kids. And you've revealed a systemic failure spanning millennia, Tormund said. Well done. 6 months later, Mira's converted cargo bay was beautiful chaos. Runt trotted over with something dead. Thank you, buddy. Gift box. Boulder lounged in the corner, her devoted shadow. The original 12 helped new cubs adjust. Glorp floated in with a data pad. 63 new referrals this week. 8 species. Mira rubbed her face. We need more blankets. She pulled out her comm, recording a message home. Hey, remember when I said this was just translation work? She panned the camera around. 12 predators relaxing, walls covered in crayon drawings. I accidentally revolutionized galactic childcare by giving out hugs. Runt put his head in her lap, tail wagging. I'm now the most feared human in council space because I made apex predators feel safe. She scratched his ears. The galaxy wasn't ready for attachment theory. Hell, I'm not ready for this. She looked at the chaos around her. Cubs who'd learned they didn't have to be alone. Next week they're sending 60 more cubs from 8 different species. I'm gonna need a bigger cuddle puddle. And maybe some therapy of my own. She ended the recording and smiled at Runt. You know what? I'm okay with this. He licked her face. Somewhere in council space, textbooks were being rewritten. Military strategists struggled to weaponize emotional intelligence. Thousands of traumatized juveniles were finally getting care. All because one human treated scared kids with kindness. The galaxy hadn't been ready, but the cubs were. And that was enough.